Good morning, all you sports fans, and happy Monday. I'm Daniel,
And I'm David.
and welcome to another podcast of the D&D Show. Today, we are going to get started on baseball. We're going to cover all four sports today because there was a lot going on this weekend. We didn't get to do our podcast yesterday because I was a little bit under the weather. I think I'm okay now, so we're just going to hop right into it. Care to lead us off, David?
So tonight we have the two AL matchups. Um, for the and then tomorrow we have the two NL matchups as well as game 2 of the AL series. Is there any I guess storylines that you're intrigued to watch play out tonight?
I still want to see how the A's handle the suspension cases that happened the last time the Houston played Oakland. What I meant by that was the hitting coach for the Houston got 20 games suspension for interfering and yelling at one of the A's players after he got hit by a pitch. So I'm really curious about how that plays out with, the how heated this rivalry will get over the course of this 5 game series.
I agree, and I'm very interested to see how um, the pitching kind of lines up as well for the A's. Um, just interested to see. They don't have a lot of experience in the postseason, so I'm curious to see how that translates on the field.
I agree, and I think the first two matchups right now I'm looking at are Lance McCullers versus Cole Bassett or Chris Bassett. I apologize. And then you have Mineo versus Valdez, which if going straight on paper, it looks like Houston does have the over under for pitching, but it's all going to come down to bullpens, and I haven't really seen an outstanding on any of these teams yet this year.
I agree. With the shortened season, I think that the bullpens kind of took the biggest hit when it came to preparedness, because I know there's been a lot of blown leads in all of the rounds so far.
Mainly the Cardinals bullpen giving up runs in every game they've played, but they're no longer in the playoffs, so I can't really talk about them. So
Yeah. But that brings us to the other matchup tonight, which is Yankees and Rays. Like we said, I I really think that the Yankees are going to win this. I know that you have a differing opinion on this one, so I'll let you take the lead on the series.
this one, this first game is such a good pitching matchup. I really wish Tyler Glasnow was pitching against Garrett Cole, but Blake Snell. This is going to be each pitcher going 4, 5, 6 innings, 2 hits apiece, maybe with no runs. This will come down to which bullpen will give up the first run. I bet this first game probably, I'll say Tampa takes it 2-0. I think it's going to be a really low scoring game. It's going to be a pitcher's duel, but I think Tampa Bay gets it done at home. And it
Uh,
is weird. It is weird seeing Tampa number one seed over the Yankees. I will say this has been a really weird experience for me having the Rays with a number one seed in the playoffs.
yeah, it's kind of weird to adjust to the seeding and how everything ended up panning out this season. But I do think I do agree with you to the extent of the kind of a pitcher's duel. But I think with Cole on the mound, I really do think that it's going to be 3-1 Yankees. I think Cole will handle business as usual. So it'll be interesting. I like the pitching matchups all across the board with this series. So this should be interesting. But one series that pitching, I'm very intrigued at how the pitching is going to line up. As we move to the NL side. What's your take on the Marlins starting rotation moving forward? Now that we're in a little bit of a longer series.
I was actually taking a look at this yesterday because once they got in, had to really think about how they were going to play this out, and just looking right down, I don't shoot. Most of them don't really have playoff experience. I barely think one of them has been through an actual playoff series.
Mm-hmm.
With such and I don't want to say young. I'll say more of a inexperienced group of guys. I think that is going to play a huge factor in how deep they go. I think if the Marlins were smart, they might turn these games maybe into bullpen games. Maybe letting your starters go 2, 3 innings at most, and then having to rely on your bullpen to close out the game from the third inning on. Because I don't know what's going to happen if they let their starters get deep into games after being seen 3 or 4 bats. I think it's going to play a huge factor, especially against a tough Braves lineup.
I agree. This is a very very tough lineup. Obviously, they got a lot of power and as well as just consistency overall. And I really do think I'm gonna go ahead and state that I think that if Marte is healthy, Starling Marte for Miami, I do think that their lineup gets almost double as good as what it would be without him because he's just such an important person for their lineup as well as their defense. But I still think the Braves are going to handle business, like we said. I believe we said last week. I really think the Braves have this one in the bag. I don't know about you,
I do think the Braves are going to
but I was
pull this
wrong.
one out.
I've been wrong. I was wrong about them against the Cubs. So I told them they weren't ready to win in the playoffs yet, and they swept them. So I'm really interested to see how that one pans out. But honestly, the series I'm really looking forward to is this Padres Dodgers, the battle for California and the NLDS.
Yeah, but I want to say one thing. How did all of the Central teams from the AL and the NL lose? Like this is literally East versus West Coast now at this late stage in the playoffs, and it's very sad to me.
It's it's something I it's just something that happened with this weird season. I mean,
Right.
I couldn't have told you one team that. I mean, I guess the game I really thought could have thought would have went differently is like Chicago. Just on paper should have beat the Marlins. But the other ones, I mean, there wasn't really an upset per se. Um, in regards to like experience, because like yeah, the Astros won their game, but I mean the Astros are the battle tested team. Obviously, most of them are on the roster from the championship. And I don't know. I just really think it's going to be interesting with how it did line up though that way with East Coast and West Coast. So I mean, I think it's going to be a good. They're all going to be good series. But specifically focusing back on the Padres Dodgers, um, I think a storyline to watch for this one is definitely what Kershaw are you going to get in this series, and what can the young bats of the Padres carry them?
I think let's see. Kershaw is slated to pitch game 2, which means he'll be ready for game 4.
Does that mean is Bueller on the mound for Game One
Yeah, Bueller's
tomorrow?
game Bueller's game 1, Kershaw's game 2 currently. And they don't have 3, 4, 5 set yet, which makes sense. But we have no idea who's pitching for San Diego at this point in time, which seems to be their niche by not telling you who's pitching until the day of.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
After dealing with that in the whole series, it's hard to figure out who to get ready for at this point.
yeah, and I'm sure like tomorrow, obviously, when they release their lineup and everything, I'm sure we'll be able to focus down some key matchups when it comes to like because with the lineups changing depending on the pitching and everything. So
Right.
it'll be interesting to see who they do throw out for the Padres.
I think the player to watch this series and is going to be Will Myers. I think everyone talks about Tatis Jr. and don't get me wrong, he is phenomenal, but Will Myers is an underrated power hitter. He showed it off against the Cardinals with 2 home runs along with Tatis in the same game, but he's a consistent hitter. He puts up good numbers. He's a doubles hitter. He knows where to put the ball. And all of his years in Tampa, I think, have brought him to this point where he knows how to lead a younger team because he was with the Rays while they were in their rebuilding stage, And now that he's in San Diego, I think he knows how to lead that team. That's just
Yeah,
my opinion.
Will Myers is definitely, like I said, one of those bats that is gonna have to carry a very heavy burden coming into this series. Um, but I would say my players to watch. It kind of correlates with what you said. But I think if they make the division roster, I think you got to have the key players being Clevenger and Lamette. I think that if either of those guys, the number one and number two for San Diego, if either of those guys can come back, I don't know if they I don't think they've released the official roster yet, but if either of those guys can even just be a presence, um, I think that vaults the Padres. And honestly, I mean, Clevenger, when he's on, he's one of the most deadly pitchers in the game, and Lamette's definitely no scrub at the number two starter position. So I think if they can get one of those guys back, I think it makes this a whole different series.
They are, let's see, 6 to 8 weeks. They're saying he should be back by the division series. So I think they might have him. Whether or not he starts, though, that's a different story.
Yes, and
He might become a bullpen. He might be a bullpen man during the division series, which would still be helpful.
I mean, both of them are dealing with elbow issues. So I mean, I'm sure they won't come back and just do a. You won't see them at 7, 8 innings start, but maybe coming out of the bullpen 3, 4 innings, be a long setup guy. So,
Right.
but that pretty much wraps up baseball talk for today. But while we transfer over to the hardwood, kind of a shocking result last night. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think a lot of people really expected
I
Game
did not.
Three to turn out how it turned out.
I didn't expect the triple double. I will say that. That 40 point. That's you know they needed it. They had to play perfect, and they got a perfect start from Jimmy Butler this game.
Absolutely, they took advantage of Anthony Davis's slow night, as well as like I mentioned the other day. Um, they had key people step up from the bench. And I believe Kelly Olynyk had 17. You
Hmm.
had Tyler Hero chipped in 17 as well.
He
But
started actually.
oh yeah, well he started in place of Bam, I believe.
Hmm.
And I mean, people are gonna have to step up in the series for Miami for them to even be in it. So I mean, the fact that they did this tonight, I mean, it shows a little bit of promise. But I'm gonna put on the other side of the spectrum here is on Anthony Davis's worst playoff shooting night of in his short career. Um, you only beat him by 11, and don't get me wrong, 11 is a lot of points in basketball, but a lot of things went wrong for the Lakers last night. And so it's still going to take perfect basketball, like we've been preaching this whole series. And like Jimmy Butler said, they have to play perfect to beat them. And they had perfect circumstances to beat them last night. I still think this is Lakers series to lose. Will they lose? I don't think so. My prediction of Lakers in 5 is still on the table, but we'll see.
Um, yeah, I definitely think there's. I'm gonna say this, and I might regret this later on. I don't think there is any scenario in which case the Lakers lose this series. I really don't. Um, Even with Anthony Davis having 15 points on a 6 of 9 shooting, Morris and Kuzma both had 19 points in 25 minutes or less, with both going 6 from 13 from the field. Now, if you look at the bench of the Heat, one person, Kelly Olynyk, 31 minutes, 5 of 9 with 17. Everybody else had less than 20 minutes of play time. And that shows you that they don't want to go to the Heat. Do not want to play their bench. They consistently will stick with their starters, which is going to tire them down so much quicker. And honestly, one, two, they had two bench players play 5 minutes or less. The Heat did. And if you look at the Lakers bench, four of them had almost 30 minutes played, which to me shows that these Lakers can basically just throw anybody in at any given time and produce numbers. As for if it's the Heat, you basically have your starters and one person coming off the bench. So it's about 6 players versus 11, and I will definitely take the 11 players all day.
Deep bench is definitely going to be something if this series does go late. That will definitely come back to bite Miami. Obviously, it just depends on the road to recovery for Bam and Goran. Uh, but I do believe that this is still, like I stated earlier, the Lakers series to lose, and I mean it should be interesting. Um, Obviously, Miami has every right to just. I mean, if they play just like they did last night, I mean, yeah, they're not out of it by any means, but I still think it's the Lakers series to lose.
Nah, and I just think Miami needed this win no matter what. Um, Even when the Lakers were up 2-0, this game would have been nice for LA to win, but they didn't necessarily need it. Miami needed to win this, and they came out to play and they won. Now that the series is 2-1, we'll see what Miami team we get.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now flipping gears a little bit, we'll move on to, or we'll look back on Saturday's the madness that was Saturday with some NCAA football. And first, I'd like to start this segment off by apologizing to Mac Jones. Um,
He definitely didn't
if
like
you
what you had
listen
to
to our
say.
if you listen to our college football segment last week, I said Mac Jones did not scare me, and he could not carry a Alabama team to a victory. And he proceeded to go off for 400 plus passing yards, 4 touchdowns. You know, casual numbers.
And only missing
Uh,
7 throws.
yeah. Yeah, and that was against number 13 Texas A&M. So it was definitely no cakewalk of a game. Obviously Texas A&M still yet to really prove themselves as powerhouse defensively, but nonetheless, I'll start off with that game. I did not expect that performance from Mac Jones.
I don't think anybody did, to be honest. Because all week, all you heard was Mac Jones won't get it done. He cannot carry this team. He does not have you know, the presence of throwing deep. He barely, I think, week one, he completed 3 passes for more than 20 yards, and he wasn't able to get the ball downfield. Now, this game, he had 3 touchdown passes of 60 plus yards. So that he set a record for NCAA conference play. And he went 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, a QBR of 94. It is very hard for a college quarterback to get a QBR above 90 any game. And he did it against a tough Aggies defense, which grew soft as the game went on. But I don't know, when you're up 30 points at one point, you kind of just lose your steam.
Absolutely. Out of this Bama team, obviously you never can bet against Bama. Um, they're always going to be there. But shifting gears, we'll stick in the SEC to start off with. Let's address. So in our very early college football season, we're both 1-0 when it comes to our locks of the week. With you getting the win for your pick of Georgia over Auburn. Care to elaborate on that game a little bit?
Going into the game, I was thinking Auburn has had such a high-powered offense for years, but Georgia has always been a stout defense. I figured defense will always beat offense when it comes to just down in the mud trenches fights. I happen to be very correct on that much. Bo Nix had a rough night against a very good secondary. He went 21 for 40 with 1 interception, had a QBR 56. Um, we couldn't, Georgia's rushing outrushed Auburn 209 yards to 36 before the fourth quarter, before garbage time. And that played such a huge role in having 4 players rush 50 plus yards for Georgia. I think overall the Auburn defense looked terrible for an 8 in the box kind of defense. Um, I do think they can come back next week and play a little bit better, but this was the game to prove that you are worthy of getting into a national championship at the end of this season. and they didn't show up to play at all.
Yeah, it just seemed like they never really were. I would say they were really never in this game. It just seemed like they didn't want it per se. Um, I think that they still, Auburn still has a chance to rebound. I still think they're a good football team. Obviously, they're not a great football team until they can prove that they can beat quality opponents. This year, something that they couldn't do the last like 2 years with Bo Nix. But I think that they'll bounce back. I'm sure they'll still pull out. Um, they'll still pull out some wins. So it'll just be interesting to watch. But
I
I
think
also
had Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll say one guy to watch for the rest of the season. And obviously it's with it being a crazy season. You got to watch Zamir White. I don't know if you caught any of the game, but man could run the ball.
Yeah, and his yards this game are very misleading. He 19 attempts for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. But that doesn't. If you watched him play and you watched his film, you will see how explosive he is at getting outside the blockers. And when he's in open space, you are more than likely to miss a tackle on him because he is so elusive. And when he gets out there, it's just he's fun to watch. And I will agree with you that he will be a big name in not only college, but I think he'll make it through to the NFL.
Keeping it within the SEC, a couple of other games of interest. We have number 3 Florida defeating obviously unranked South Carolina. Which the reason why this game was so big is because, as you know, I've kind of really been talking highly of Florida. I think this is one of the better teams in the SEC. Um, the offense looked a little bit shaky, but they really, when it mattered in the third quarter, they kind of locked it in and got 2 scores. Kyle Trask yards obviously didn't really show the quality of his performance with the 4 touchdown passes, but only 260 yards to show for it. So I still think this is one of the best teams in the SEC. Obviously, after seeing Mac Jones go off, they might be the second best
Mm.
team in the SEC. Because I don't know if Bama plays like that every week, I don't know if anybody can beat them. But it'll be interesting to watch them progress. I think that this team has a chance to run the table and take on Alabama.
So now, question: based on just we're 2 weeks in, we've seen a lot of SEC football. Who do you think plays in the SEC title match as of today, being 2 weeks in?
I I
Obviously, we're gonna say Bama.
I was gonna say I honestly would stick with that right there. I mean, I think I just don't know if anybody's gonna challenge. I don't know if anybody's gonna challenge Bama on that side. I just don't.
Okay, I
I
think it'll be Bama, ooh, Bama, Florida. I guess.
I agree. No, that's definitely would be my pick as of right now because I think this Florida team is firing on all cylinders right now. Obviously their offense needs to catch up a little bit with their defense, but you know, I think this is a good team. Sticking in we have one more matchup that we're going to cover in the SEC. Actually 2 more, I apologize. Mississippi State, the team that we thought was going to be the surprise of the SEC. They lost a stinker of a game to Arkansas.
Yeah, they didn't. They did not show up to play at all. It's very unfortunate because Arkansas is not a good team,
No,
and
they have not looked. I mean, they've definitely gotten better under Sam Pittman, but Sam Pittman definitely doesn't have a track record of leading the teams, especially to wins like this. I mean, this is their first it's their first SEC win since like 2017, and the man that everybody praised last week. I mean, I don't know if you can blame anybody but him for this loss. I mean, KJ Costello, 3 costly turnovers. I just don't know if you can really blame anyone but him.
Um, yeah, I mean, those balls were nowhere near their intended receivers. But I'm pretty sure one was deflected by a receiver, which technically you can't blame the quarterback for a pass that should have been caught but was deflected up in the air. Now, don't quote me on that because I don't remember 100%. But their whole team as a whole, I mean, Jaquavius Marks 10 carries for 37 yards. Dylan Johnson 9 carries for 39 yards. Osiris Mitchell 5 receptions for 61 yards. I mean, all of these numbers are terrible. Like they got nothing going on in any facet of this football game.
Yeah, and if you watch they had a drive kind of late in the I believe it was late in the fourth quarter, uh, where they had a 4th and 1 and just got completely stuffed by the defense of Arkansas. And don't get me wrong, like Arkansas, I'm not knocking them as a team, but this is definitely Mississippi's loss. I mean, Mike Leach is gonna have to do something with this team before next week, because if this team comes out and plays, they're not going to be able to compete with the big dogs of the SEC.
Right. I get that. Now let's switch gears for a second to this miserable Texas loss.
Yes.
What do you think about this?
Switching to what I like to call the beginning of the upsets with the Mississippi State Arkansas. We move up 6-7 spots to number 9 Texas. Obviously Big 12 game means not a whole lot of defense played, which is very apparent with the 33-31 final. It obviously, the stat that really stuck out to me from this game is Sam Ellinger. Yes, he was very he was very consistent with the ball. But the 17 for 36 when it comes to completions, at some point you got to take a few more shots. You can't be throwing balls away. I know that there's a lot of he just threw away, obviously to avoid a sack, which is great. But obviously, I mean, he put his team in position to win. Obviously, with the fumble on the 1 yard line, it's never an easy loss by any means.
No, and I get where you're coming from. You gotta protect the ball when you're that close. Yeah, I get it. He was reaching out to cross the pylon, but when it's this close of a game and it's only second down, you gotta protect the ball and move your team closer. You can't just basically throw up a hail mary and just stick your arm out and hope that you pass the pylon because he honestly was still 2 yards short.
Exactly, and he was fighting for, the yards, but I don't think he necessarily needed to reach out
They still had two
early.
more. They had
Yes,
still 2 more attempts to get that ball into the end zone, which I think they really could have done at that point. But he basically costed his team the game by reaching out, trying to do it all himself.
exactly. I mean, that's one of those plays that somebody with a little bit more experience maybe doesn't make. But it's just one of those losses that the committee's going to have to look at when say they run the table here, which I think is very possible because this Oklahoma team, I'm not sure what Oklahoma team is going to show up when they play this next week in the Red River rivalry game. But I mean, it's one of those teams that, I mean, they're not out of it, but it's not looking promising with all the powerhouses of the SEC, and especially with Big Ten coming back. It's going to be interesting.
Do you think this loss will be the reason Texas doesn't get in?
I believe that it's still almost too early for this discussion to even happen about Texas, because I think they have to show that they can beat Oklahoma and beating them convincingly. And then the game that's really going to come down to is when Texas plays. I believe they play Kansas State, the team that beat Oklahoma. Um, I, I don't know exactly what week it is. I think it might be. I think it might be week 8.
They play. Well, honestly, they play Iowa State and Kansas State. Both teams that did upset Oklahoma.
Yes, and Iowa State. Iowa State has always been a thorn in Texas' side. They always play them really tough.
Correct.
So,
So those games are Friday, November 27th and Saturday, December 5th. Those are the
yes,
last 2 games on the Longhorn schedule.
yes, and honestly, if it comes down to that, as a fan, I'm going to be ecstatic that we're even in contention for a playoff spot. Obviously, with half the teams not even played games yet, it's just too
Right,
difficult to
and
really call a
this is all
playoff.
going to get thrown in the. This is all going to get thrown into the wind in 2 weeks when we get Big Ten football back.
Yes,
So
exactly. Which the return of Big Ten football hurts another team that suffered their first loss of the season, which is the UCF Knights. Obviously the Knights have always always been a competitor. They've always been I guess at the top of their conference, or at least close to the top of their conference, dating back to the years they self-proclaimed championships that
the
they won.
undefeated, but yeah,
um,
such an interesting time.
absolutely, but they suffered a loss to Tulsa, and I gotta be honest, I had to look up this Tulsa roster because I didn't know a single person on the Tulsa football team, which is why I was so surprised that they lost, because I thought Dylan Gabriel, that everybody was saying, was a dark horse candidate for the Heisman at the start of the season. And after watching that stinker of a game with Tulsa, I think he's about written out of the finalist
Equation.
category. Yes, exactly.
I mean, when you throw up 51 pass attempts and you complete 28 of them, and you have 1 touchdown out of those 28 completions against, it doesn't even look like this. I mean, it looks like Tulsa got whacked their first game. Oh no, they lost. They lost 16-7 against Oklahoma State. So I guess they're playing teams a little bit better. Um, but yeah, this team is a bunch of, I don't want to say nobodies, but people we don't know, people who haven't been in the limelight for college football. And when UCF is supposed to be held to such a higher standard due to their um, undisputed, undefeated championship reign when they didn't even play for a bowl, it blows my mind that people. I was never a UCF fan. I mean, their season every year isn't really such a hard season to get through, and their conference isn't tough. They're in the American Conference, but you can't lose games like this, especially when you're ranked. And it wasn't just a they didn't lose in the last quarter. They lost before halftime essentially.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that obviously this is a pretty significant loss for UCF for multiple reasons. But obviously, them wanting to get national recognition, this is definitely not going to help.
I agree with that. Let's see.
Sticking
We
in the
got
American Conference, we have the final game that we're going to talk about is my lock of the week. SMU over their counterpart Memphis, and the reason why I chose SMU was because I'm very familiar with their quarterback Shane Buechele. As many of you guys know, he was a former Longhorn. He got beat out by Sam Ellinger for the job, and then he transferred to SMU. And I mean, his stats, they preach for themselves. SMU is always a good football team. They've been a really good football team with Shane at the helm. But I mean, he leads the NCAA in touchdowns. He's got I believe he's 12th in passing yards. I mean, he's got like an average QBR of like 83. So I mean, whenever you do that week in and week out, I mean, obviously there's a couple of games in there where his stats were a little bit padded. But I mean, when can do that week in and week out, I mean, it's you got to do something on defense to really lose a game.
I caught this game uh, while I was at a family function on Saturday, and this SMU team looked really good. They look like a well-oiled machine. Um, their run game is very good, and when you match that with a very good passing game, you're going to make defenses look silly. And they were up when I looked at the score. It was 24-10 at the time, and I thought this game got out of hand very quickly. And then I turned it back on. It was 24-24. Um, and I was very surprised at this game because I figured I'd give it a watch when you called the lock. I was like, you know what? I'll see how this game goes. And it was very entertaining to watch. I mean, SMU's defense is very good at controlling the pass and getting into blitzing the quarterback. They have a very good defensive line that causes a lot of pressure on quarterbacks, and it's going to be fun to watch them play the rest of the season out.
Yeah, and I would like to say that I really think that this game the score was a little bit closer than what the actual game was. I think Memphis got shut out in the fourth quarter. Um Obviously they kicked a game winning field goal. So I mean it was tied. So it wasn't like they ran away with this game, but I think the score was closer than the actual game. But like I was saying with Shane's stats, obviously they're a little bit skewed by the fact that he played North Texas and he's played Stephen F. Austin. So I mean, those are two games that his stats definitely were saying. But I look forward to this team specifically. Um, I'd like to compare this team to UCF of the past because I think if they can make it past Cincinnati in 2 weeks, I think they have a chance to run the table.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm looking at their schedule right now, and there are a few teams I would like to see them that I will enjoy watching. Cincinnati is one of them. I think Houston will be another game, and then Temple will be a game that those three games will determine their season in a nutshell. I think those are going to be the hardest matchups for SMU, and if they run the table, I think they would be. I think they're in better contention than a UCF team of 3 years ago.
I think so, and I think that with the wins, if they can beat Memphis and Cincinnati and go undefeated, I think that as long as Cincinnati stays the course that they're on, I think that it'll definitely be enough to possibly put them into a playoff spot. Obviously, a lot has to happen in the SEC, and who knows with the Big Ten how that's going to pan out. But it's just it's a fun thing to speculate early in the season. One more storyline I'd like to talk about from this game is I don't know if you said that you got to watch a little bit of it, but did you see that the entire student section of SMU got kicked out of the
I
game?
was wondering what happened. So I'm watching the game, and all of a sudden I'm just watching people leave, and the announcers are like, "What is going on?" And then finally they got it cleared out that they weren't following.
The mass exodus of people in the middle of the game. So
Yeah,
yeah,
they were kicked out for not following their mask mandates, which I think it's cool to see students back at college football events. I think it's a good start to implementing plans across all platforms for sports.
yeah. And I don't know. Also, one other thing I'd like to mention about this game is, I don't know. Whenever you click on the highlights for it, the last thing that I noticed is whenever they were celebrating their game winning field goal, they were shooting confetti off on the sidelines, and I thought that was kind of I've heard of like I've seen so many different celebrations, but that's the first time I've seen somebody. I mean, yeah, they beat a top 25 team, but they had like confetti launchers and everything, and it was going. They're going crazy on the sideline.
Yeah, but I mean, they deserved it. They play. This was a good game through and through. And I just think your emotions run high when you are playing a top 25 team and you're winning, and it comes down to the final drive. You know, emotions run high. Your adrenaline's pumping. I think it was just worth it to them, and it's good to see that they're playing. They're putting it all out on the field.
And with that being said, let's transfer. We're gonna go from the college fields to the professional fields,
Yay!
and with an action-packed day on yesterday. And I think we start with the early games, early takeaways. Um, we can start with the Ravens. The Ravens versus the Washington football team.
Who?
Lamar ran wild. Um, but I mean, it was kind of a close game. I'm not gonna lie. This Ravens team, after seeing them play the Chiefs and now only winning by 14 points to the football team, I'm curious to see where this team goes. I really expected a few more skewed games, especially against the Washington football team.
I mean, kudos to Dwayne Haskins. He has been um pretty consistent the past couple games. I know their record doesn't show it; they're 1-3, but this offense is actually pretty good. You have a rookie rushing, a rusher, Antonio Gibson, who isn't too consistent just yet, but it's his first season. I mean, he had 13 carries, 46 yards, and a touchdown. Not a great stat line, but they were just keeping the pressure up. They were doing well at switching their game plan. They didn't focus solely on rushing or passing. They they went at this Baltimore defense with everything they had. Terry McLaurin, that's going to be a receiver for the next couple of years. I mean, his stat line was 10 receptions, 118 yards, no touchdowns. But I think that between Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, I think this team will maybe pull up some upsets later on in the season.
Yeah, and I'm gonna save that soundbite that you had earlier. Then you said that Dwayne Haskins started to play consistently, and I'm gonna go ahead and read a few facts off for you from this rookie quarterback. So coming into this game, he has not in his short career he had not thrown for over 300 yards. He had a completion percentage coming into this game of just over 50% in every game, as well as coming off of a 3 interception performance to the Browns, which we will talk about in a little bit, who is definitely the surprise of the early season. But while I do agree with you that he has potential, um, I think that the fact that they're a young team all around, they don't really have very many veterans on offense. I think that's kind of skewing his numbers. But I definitely do not think um, that Dwayne Haskins is the answer for the Washington football team. And I'm saying it now. I know he's only had 4 games in his career, but I'm saying it right now. Dwayne Haskins not the answer. Honestly, if you want to save your season and have a chance to win this really crappy division, put in Alex Smith.
I think Alex Smith needs a little bit more time off, just to get the feel back. I mean, he had a gruesome injury. I think you know he's a lot further along than I thought he'd be in his rehab already. But you know, I think see, I don't know. I think for now, Dwayne. I think he settled in this. I think this game he did settle in, and playing against such a hard defense, it's daunting. When you hear you're playing the Ravens, I guarantee it probably sends chills down your spine. You're like, oh crap, we got they have a good front, they have a good secondary. You can't throw the ball in the middle of the field against them because they will pick it. But I think yes, he has been very streaky coming into this game, but I think he settled down and he found his rhythm. That's all I'm gonna say. You know,
Well,
we'll see how he plays from here on out, though.
flipping from one rookie quarterback to the next. Congratulations to Joe Burrow on your first victory of the season. Obviously with the tie last week. It's good to get in the W column. And honestly, wasn't the craziest game for Burrow, but I really think that the running game finally picked up, and so it wasn't all on Joe Burrow. And I think that's honestly what set them over this week, when getting Joe his first victory.
I mean, Joe Mixon's a scary runner.
The Joe and Joe show.
Yeah,
It's
that's.
going to be fun to watch for the next few years in Cincinnati. Obviously, this is no knock on. Uh, I mean, Garner Minshew is doing what he can with what he's given. Obviously, I think Jacksonville and Cincinnati are very similar teams. If their running game gets going and can put up 100+ yards and some touchdowns, I think that both of them can win games. But obviously, probably the disappointing factor was, Robinson. I mean, 17 carries for 75 yards, no touchdowns on the ground. I mean, I think these two teams are very similar, like I said, and I think with both having young quarterbacks, I think it's all comes down to the running games.
I agree with you on that statement. But as of right now, it kind of looks like Joe Burrow had the edge over Gardner Minshew in the quarterback department for this game, at least. But Gardner Minshew has these games where he just looks like he's been playing in the NFL for almost a decade. He's so precise, and he can pick at your defense with such precision. But Joe Burrow is going to be a household name by the end of the season in the NFL. That is
Uh,
just my opinion.
I definitely can see that being a thing. With that being said, sticking with the theme of rookie quarterbacks, let's switch over to Tampa Bay versus the Chargers with Justin Herbert at the helm, and in vintage Brady fashion, crushing the hearts of Chargers fans everywhere with the third and fourth quarter essentially comeback. Um, I got to watch this game. This is one of the ones that I did watch this weekend, and something that I noticed um was, I think that the turning point in the game was the fumble in the second quarter by the Chargers. I almost said San Diego, by the Chargers, and that gave them points right before half. I think if they could have just ran the ball out, went to half with the 24-7 lead, I think this game doesn't end the way that it ends.
Think. Um, but I mean, this was vintage Tom Brady if I've ever seen it. He looked like he was back in New England. To be honest, he had his one receiver that he picked on the whole day, and his rushing game. I mean, then again, he never really had a rushing game in New England, but um, when you can compliment Tom Brady with an 111-yard rushing day, this team is going to bring the heat.
Yes, and a major storyline out of this game would definitely be the loss of OJ Howard for the season with the Achilles injury. Obviously, it's going to really hurt that offense, losing one of the weapons. Maybe they'll incorporate Gronk a little bit more now. But obviously, the loss of Austin Eckler in this game obviously didn't help the Chargers with their leading rusher being their quarterback with 14 yards. Um,
Right as soon as I got rid of Josh Kelly on my team.
yeah. But like I said, this you did mention the fact that this is vintage Brady. I mean, if you think about it, this lines up perfectly with something of 28-3. Because down 24-7. Um, he threw an early pick six, and then he bounces back and throws for, I mean, 5 touchdowns. I mean, it doesn't get much more Brady than that.
But
So
I will say we have seen a lot more picks out of Tom Brady in the past 6 weeks. 6 games than we have basically in his whole entire career. He's been throwing a lot more interceptions recently, and I think it's just he's not acclimated to either it's the warm weather or it's just this offense. I haven't figured out which one yet.
And it's like Brady said, and I believe when he was getting interviewed, this is week 4 of the preseason. This should be week 4 of the preseason. So I mean, they're expecting to be firing on all cylinders, and they won't be firing on all cylinders until like week 8, week 9. Um, but sticking with the goats, we flipped to the Saints game where I thought they were about to uh at the end of the first quarter, man, it looked like that team was about to be a dumpster fire this season, but they managed to come back. Kamara got going, Breeze 2 touchdown passes of his own. I mean, the defense stepped up when it needed to.
This Saints team is I've I have not seen a Saints team play like this in at least since they won a Super Bowl in 2008. Like this has just been dreadful to watch. Yeah, they're getting W's, but we've never seen an offense lacking as much as this team has been lacking since they lost Michael Thomas. Um, there is a bright spot for this team though. Emmanuel Sanders is, getting more of the targets now, and he is showing back. He is showing up, and Alvin Kamara is always a good person to rely on. But I mean, Drew Brees threw 25 pass attempts for 246 with 1 interception and 2 touchdowns. That's not a stat line that's usually a Drew Brees type of game.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the age factor. Not being able to throw the ball down the field as much. When people always joke about Michael Thomas only running slant routes, that's a big part of their offense. And I mean, a lot of the yards after catch help Breeze's stat lines. But I think this also is this kind of leads into the next game. I think that with the Vikings offense reminds me a lot of the Saints offense, where um Cousins is obviously he's hasn't really panned out to that contract that he got, but I think both teams are very, very dependent on the run game. Kamara got going kind of later into the second quarter and third quarter, and look at that, they started scoring points. Dalvin Cook, had a monster day. When he got going, the Vikings were going, and I think that both of those are two offenses that obviously, if they get one dimensional and they can only pass, they're not going to win games. But if they can get a run game established, I think that they can compete with these teams. Like I honestly think that the Vikings can compete with anybody in their division if they just bring both assets to the game.
See, I think when the difference between Minnesota and New Orleans right now is New Orleans doesn't have a second receiver like Minnesota does currently.
With
Between
Justin
but
Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson emerging out of no out of his game 3 breakout and continuing that trend this week, and Adam Thielen getting back to his 100-yard receiving games. Um, New Orleans really needs Michael Thomas back to even start competing in that division because that division is going to get tough very soon.
Yes, and with that being said, that division, one of their counterparts, the Panthers, this Cardinals team, and I'll get to this later, but one of the storylines that I like to bring to light with this game is Kyler Murray, because I, I believe that people were giving him too much credit in his first 2 games. A lot of people were having him in the MVP conversation after the 2 weeks. And I think that these last 2 performances kind of humbled him, brought him back to earth. Because without a consistent run game, this team is not gonna be able to, especially in the division that they are, They got to play Seattle, the Rams, which we'll get to talk about here in a minute. Um, and even the 49ers that banged up, I still think that this is probably the last place team in that division.
I agree with that. And like you were just touching on with the running game, when your actual running back has 13 carries for 35 yards and is second on your rushing list behind your quarterback who has 6 carries for 78 yards, you gotta figure you can't have your quarterback running as much because his rate for injury is greatly increased when it comes to that.
And
And go
this
ahead.
is no knock on Bridgewater and the Panthers. Obviously their offense took a little bit. I mean they kind of got off to the fast start with the 2 first quarter touchdowns, but this offense is one of those where they can have a really high ceiling and they can come out and Bridgewater can throw the ball all over the field, or they can have one of these weeks where it's they got to fight for every point.
Can we call out DJ Moore? Um, I'm very tired of these lackluster performances, especially out of the number one receiver on that team. It's when Robbie Anderson is new to the team, DJ, and Anderson was brought in for these long balls, and he is now averaging double targets over their number one receiver. Something is going on in that Carolina offense.
Well, and I think that that just doesn't necessarily fall on DJ Moore. I think it more follows on the scheming whenever placing the teams because, like DJ Moore was targeted 6 times with only 4 catches. But if you look at it, um, like I mean, he had the last week he had only 2 receptions with 4 targets because I think after he had that big game against Tampa Bay, they realized that um, the way to stop that offense is you got to take away one, possibly two of the options, which I think a lot of people are covering Samuel and DJ Moore, and they're allowing Anderson to be open because Anderson is like the third option in that offense.
Hmm.
So I think that a lot of it has to do with defensive schemes. Why he's not getting it, as like we'll touch on with the Sunday night football game. You'll hear me rant about one of my fantasy players, but it's not necessarily on him. It's on the scheming of defenses. Basically just taking him out. I mean, you take out their best weapon, and I think that's what they're doing there. Speaking of with the last of the early matchups, I
God,
believe
another game I don't want to talk about.
no, we'll save that one for last. We'll save that one for last because we still have Russell Wilson squeaking out the win against the Dolphins. Obviously, they kind of I mean, the Dolphins fought back. They came back. They made it close. But ultimately Russell Wilson got it done. Still getting it done. That brings me to the next point of who's coming out of this NFC West?
If I had to take a, if I'm going on right now, the Seahawks are probably the team to beat. We saw Russell Wilson not have a week where he's throwing 5 touchdowns for 400 yards. That's all we've seen out of Russell Wilson this so far in this season. But even when he throws for 360, his running game gets the job done. Chris Carson had 2 touchdowns and 80 yards. Um, so whenever we see such a balanced attack, we don't see that really from any other team in the West. LA, we'll touch on that. We're going to touch on that game in a little bit, but I just want to say it'll go Seattle, LA, San Francisco, and then Arizona is my NFC division.
Yes, and this Dolphins team,
They played. They
as a Bills fan, I have mad respect for Ryan Fitzpatrick. The fact that he's went in there with a team that's basically in rebuild mode, um, that has been in rebuild mode. The whole tank for Tua, um, but coming out there and being able to compete in games against high caliber teams. I mean, they were in it against the 4-0 Bills. They're in it against the 4-0 Seahawks. I mean, they managed to beat the Jaguars coming off of that really hot week. Everybody was giving the Jaguars. Everybody picked the Jaguars to win that game. I
I
mean,
did.
yeah, he's picking. I mean, he's carrying the team. It's definitely interesting. Obviously, with we still have one more matchup against them this season, so that'll be an interesting one. Hopefully, they're not a thorn in our side. But sticking with the early games, the one that I can't wait to talk about, we have the Browns beating the Cowboys. And this one has so many storylines. First off, Dak setting historic numbers in a losing effort. But Mike McCarthy always had a history of having, um, I wouldn't say, I would say defense. He's always had a okay defense. Like usually, if Mike McCarthy was going to lose a game, it'd be because of his offense not producing, whether it be the run game, pass game. At least in his past. But man, this defense was tough to watch.
How? How do you let Odell Beckham have 2 rushing attempts for 73 yards and a touchdown and averaging more yards than anybody else on that rushing attack? Just I there's so many things I want to say about this game that we don't have time for. Being a Cowboys fan, this was very disappointing. Our defense was terrible. Um, how can you have an MVP candidate? And yes, Dak Prescott is an MVP candidate. Don't at me. Um, and lose this game to the Browns. Yeah, I guess Cleveland is 3-1. Yes, they're still terrible. But we need to pick up our defense. I'm getting tired of watching our offense play so well just for our defense to blow games for us.
And with that being said, with the stats, obviously fourth quarter rolls around with the nearly 30-point lead. I think it's a 27-point lead. Obviously, you kind of let off the gas a little bit, which has happened, which led to 3 scores in the fourth quarter for the Cowboys. But I really want to focus on the consistency of the run game for the Browns so far this season. The fact that honestly, I mean, they had like just consistency from you had, um, especially with Nick Chubb leaving the game, you didn't know what the run game was going to do. But the fact D'Ernest Johnson stepped up for 96 yards, Odell with the 2 really long runs, and then you have Kareem Hunt who's getting you 70 week in week out. I mean, this is definitely going to be a scary team if Baker Mayfield can figure out the passing game. And by that, I mean consistently being able to throw the ball downfield. He's been able to dink and dunk it with the crossing routes to Jarvis Landry, as well as the same thing with Odell. I mean, if he can figure out the long ball, this is a scary team. I mean, granted, they still got to face the Ravens and they still got to face the Steelers. And like that division is no cakewalk, but it's still a team that can make some noise.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't get to tell you who my overrated player was because that would have totally kicked me in the butt this week. But the fact that you can have a receiver go 1 for 1, 37 yards and a touchdown, and still almost play better than your actual quarterback, this team is very intricate and they will be fun to watch the rest of the season. I don't think they're going to have as many games like this, scoring almost 50 points. I don't think we'll see that again, at least for a couple weeks. But I'm interested to see who their new lead rusher is going to be with Johnson coming out of nowhere and basically outrushing Kareem Hunt. That is, and we will see how that all plays out. And you even had Hilliard in there, who was taking carries away from Hunt, no Johnson.
And I think that they're gonna stick to the game plan they've had all season, which was Kareem Hunt is their goal line threat inside the 20. give him the rock. And I think that that is still going to be their bread and butter. I don't think they're going to change their offense. That's why I think D'Ernest Johnson had more touches. He definitely had obviously 13, so that's two more carries than Kareem Hunt. But I think they're going to use him in the open field and use Kareem Hunt as more of a
Goal line.
goal line back. That he's originally his original role on the team. With that being said, the Browns obviously they're still a shaky team because they've been flashy in the past, and then the next week they have a complete letdown. So it'll be interesting to watch. Moving to the second slate of games, we have we'll talk about the other NFC West team, the Rams. Um, I don't know this offense.
I can't really say much about this game. I
This
mean,
this offense is just super shaky. Um, I don't know why. I mean, I think the Giants kind of took the run game away, which is why the play action pass was not being effective. Like when this Rams team took on like the Bills, and because I noticed that um they didn't run the ball as well, obviously, because if you take away the run, you can just stack the box. Um, if you don't have to stack the box and you can cover everyone, I mean, you're gonna have games like this where a really high powered offense just lays an egg.
yeah, and I mean, this Rams team, on paper, you would expect higher numbers and better gameplay, especially against an 0-4 Giants, whose team probably couldn't beat Alabama right now if they tried. But I do want to say one thing about this. Devontae Freeman coming into New York and is now taking over that starting role in the rushing game, I think will be a spark for this team. And maybe Danny Dimes can get it together. And maybe we'll see some good games out of New York because they sure need it.
Early season, still getting everything going. This game was obviously a stinker to watch, but I appreciated the Golden Tate Jalen Ramsey fight at the end. That was fun to watch.
What's new
Um,
with Jalen Ramsey though?
but sticking with the stinker games, the other game or one of the other games in the second slate was Colts Bears, which we knew was going to be a low scoring affair with two offenses that really
Haven't clicked. I guess
haven't
that's the best
haven't
term.
haven't clicked in full. And then you have two really good defenses going up against each other. So obviously Nick Foles, I mean, okay start for him. Nothing crazy. Uh, Colts just did enough to win this game. Obviously, Bears had a chance, but they just couldn't. They just couldn't score, and that's what happens when you play the number one defense in the NFL. Um, your barely existent offense becomes a non-existent offense.
But we are starting to see glimpses of what this Bears offense can do. I mean, Allen Robinson, past 2 weeks, has shown great chemistry with Nick Foles.
Yes.
And before that, Trubisky didn't, I think, barely targeted him because they didn't have that good of a chemistry together. But now that Nick Foles is actually a better passer over Mitch Trubisky, I think we will start to see Allen Robinson get more games of 100 yards, and I think we're gonna get to see Jimmy Graham get back into the game. We're gonna have some more wheel routes for David Montgomery, and I think this offense has the ability to put up numbers if we can actually get a good rushing attack out of them as well.
Yes. I think that this game is definitely no knock on the Bears offense necessarily. It was an average performance for them, yes. But I think this is more of a testament to the Colts defense being the number one in the league. Basically shutting out the Bears rushing attack. And when that's the case and it all falls on to Nick Foles, or even if Mitch Trubisky was in there, that's when Bears are just not going to be able to handle business.
I agree, and this this game may be a stinker in the words of a low scoring game. But this was a defensive game, if I have seen one yet this season. And, you know, the Colts have the best defense in the league, but this Chicago Bears defense did show up to play. And we can't knock on them either. I mean, when you hold a pretty good rushing team to only 68 yards for one person on rushing, I think we might need to start taking this Bears team a little bit more seriously in the upcoming weeks.
And I think this comes down to their ability to perform in divisional games. When they do start rolling in, obviously, what I'd like to see this team play the Lions with Nick Foles. I want them to see them play Green Bay. Um, I think this comes down to their ability to perform in their divisional games because the Bears teams of the past have um kind of disappeared. Even their
Falling apart.
defenses have kind of disappeared when it came to divisional games.
That's fair. And I mean, we haven't seen a good Bears team in at least 6 years. So we don't really understand. They don't.
But
Go ahead.
yeah, since Cody Parkey ripped the heart out
Oh
of
God.
all those faithful fans' hearts, he made me $20. So
Hey, what's worse, the butt fumble, Tony Romo taking the extra point and trying to score with it, or the Cody Parkey?
I mean, I think it has to be the Tony Romo. Just with
Yeah, that.
how miserable that franchise has been. I mean, at least the Bears in the last 15 seasons made a Super Bowl. Was it? No, was it 2004, 5? I don't know.
5 was Carolina, so 4, 3 or 4. No, it wasn't 3. It was 4.
4, yeah. Um,
Because
with that being said, we'll move to the last of the second slate of games, which is near and dear to my heart. Bills Raiders. Um, Below average day for Josh Allen, but he was playing with the bum shoulder there towards the end. Um, Defense stepped up whenever we needed him to, forcing turnovers. Um, they kind of let up there at the end. They let up that late score.
I mean,
But
Stephon Diggs looked like the old Stephon Diggs in this game.
yeah, and this team is definitely it's going to be an interesting storyline with the Tennessee Titans being on COVID because this team was slated to play the Titans next week, and from a few of my sources say that this game might be rescheduled for later. So basically, the Bills will have a Week 5 bye, which a Week 5 bye going into Week 6 against Kansas City is going to be an extremely
Difficult
good.
task.
Well, yeah, it's a good thing and not a good thing. A good thing is you get that extra week of film. You get to strategize against them. But the bad thing is you lose any rhythm that you've had going into it. So it'll be interesting. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this game. Um,
I have
uh,
one thing I want to say about this game.
okay.
Where the hell is Josh Jacobs gone?
I think Josh Jacobs. I think this team is one of those like I keep preaching. I think it's one of those ride or die teams. I think if you can get your run game going, I think this team is firing on all cylinders. I think you have to start incorporating Jacobs in the pass game um, more than what he already is. But like I was getting ready to say, I think that the one thing that I would like to say about this Bills team is yes, you have Stephon Diggs, yes, you have Cole Beasley, yes, you have John Brown, but a player to watch for the future is definitely Gabe Davis.
I was, and I agree with you. I mean, just on paper, he's a menace. I mean, he's 6'2", 210, and he is a very explosive receiver. He can get outside, he can beat you inside, and he's good off the line. So I think in 4 games he has shown he is a very good third receiver when he's called on.
And that's all you have to have when you have star receivers on the other side of the ball with you. You can just be a trustworthy hands guy. You don't have to necessarily make the big play every time. So that's definitely going to be something that I hope that the Bills take advantage of in the upcoming weeks. But with that being said, the last game, Sunday Night Football, um, the Nick Mullins led 49ers versus a struggling Carson Wentz and that Philadelphia offense. But Philly came out with the victory. They cemented themselves at the top of their division with a astounding 1-2-1 record. So what's your takes from this game?
Well, George Kittle, was he even ever injured?
He came out. He came out firing all cylinders. I played the guy I play in fantasy this week. Had him. He scored 41 points. It's looking like he's going to beat me this week. I mean, it's a tough. It's coming off of an injury. I mean, that's the performance you like to see if you're a 49ers fan.
I was gonna say 15 targets, 15 receptions, and he was out for 2 weeks with a very bad injury. Coming in, putting up 183 yards and 1 touchdown. I mean, you couldn't ask for a much better performance out of a returning guy from injury. Um, but overall, uh, Jerick McKinnon seems to be settling into his role as the number one rusher for the 49ers right now. Um, the only thing I'm kind of worried about is this little tandem for quarterbacks that's going on right now. I feel like that we don't really know who to expect to start each game, and I think it's really going to throw a wrench in these plans. I mean, CJ Beathard played very well, but when Nick Mullins came in, I mean, what's your take on all this?
So I think that until CJ Beathard lays an egg, I think this is his team until Jimmy G comes back. I don't think there's going to be a controversy. I think it's after leading his team and scoring once, and honestly, if George Kittle didn't basically block the ball out of his teammates' hands on that Hail Mary, I think that guy had a chance to catch the ball. Um, but I think that this team it's CJ's team right now. Um, on the other side of things, I think that one of the surprises is the I don't know, I guess the letdown of the Jalen Hurts effect. Obviously he touched the field like 3 times in the game, with a fumbled snap, a 5-yard run on a failed fake play, and then he missed up the read option. And I just think that if they want this, if they want like a spark for this offense, I think they have to get Jalen Hurts involved. Um, they have to figure out what that is, because it's obviously the chemistry with him and Jason Kelsey isn't there. He's had 3 fumbled snaps on the year. Um, I know it's just jitters, I'm sure, but it's something that they're gonna have to figure out, because this offense for Philly, I mean, they figured out the recipe to beat them is stop Zach Ertz, stop Miles Sanders. If neither of them get hot, this team is beatable in all facets of the game.
And I think it doesn't help that they don't really have a secure number one receiver. I mean, just they don't have that one person that they can rely on deep in games.
Exactly. And like Deshaun Jackson was hurt. You have Dallas Goedert out, so your number one receiver is another tight end. So with them was both being out, and you relying on. I mean, Richard Rodgers led the team in receptions, I believe. Um, in this game, or
Greg Ward.
tied. Yeah, Greg Ward did, but he had 3 catches for 35 yards. But he was still. I mean, he was the. This offense is built for 2 tight ends, and I think the fact that Dallas Goedert was hurt, it didn't help their offense, and that's why you only saw the 193 yards from Carson Wentz.
And I definitely think Carson Wentz is going to have to play a little bit better for this team to, not fall behind everybody else.
I mean, yeah, this is a stinker of a division, and it's one of the worst. I mean, the worst divisions I've seen.
It's sad.
Very, very sad.
But
But
I mean, this Dallas team should not be 1-3. I mean,
now they should be 0-4.
okay. Okay there. All right now. Um
Falcons gifted them one, so they should be 0-4. Um, yeah, I mean, with that being said, the 0-3 Falcons take on the Packers tonight. In the late game. This Green Bay team, I mean, Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers clicking on all cylinders. Is there any chance Falcons stop that train tonight?
no. I mean, let's be honest here. This Falcons team has given up 3 games. They're able to take a lead, but they can't hold that lead, and it's you got to do that with Green Bay. You got to close the game out. You got to be tough defensively, and I just don't think they have what it takes to. I mean, they're gonna either lock down Aaron Jones, so they're not gonna have a rushing game, but then you got to lock down Aaron Rodgers. So which Aaron are you not gonna compete against? That's the real question tonight.
And I think that this defense will hold Aaron Jones to, I mean, an underwhelming performance for an Aaron Jones performance. That I think that he'll probably have about 12 12 to 15 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown or two. Um, and but the player to watch in this game for me is I think this kind of the surprising receiver this season and Calvin Ridley. I think that he's going to have a big game, and if he has a big game, it gives the Falcons the best chance to compete in this late contest.
Um, yeah, and I don't really want to say. I would say it's more of a reemergence of Calvin Ridley because he has always played very well, and he's always been um, explosive when catching the ball. It's just now that they don't have such a. I mean, Julio Jones hasn't been playing Julio Jones ball, but this offense has a very stacked receiving core between Julio, Russell Gage now, who has been playing tremendously since the beginning of the season, Calvin Ridley, and even their running game is starting to click with Todd Gurley, who I thought was going to be very down and out this season. And the fact that they are 0-3 does shock me because this team has put up some numbers. They just, like I said, cannot close the game out, and it's very sad.
I find this ironic that one of the things from the 28-3 game that one of the takeaways is that this young defense, this young core, would be back and be competing, in the NFC for a long time to come. But I don't think that defense has ever lived up to the hype that it was given whenever they did play in the Super Bowl. I know they lost a lot of key. I know they lost like Vic Beasley. They've lost a lot of their key players on defense, but they still have to find their identity as a defense um in order to compete with everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we don't have. I was looking at their first 3 games, and yeah, they played 3 pretty good teams, but they were up by 15 points at least in all 3 games. And to see 3 L's on that schedule is just it has to be devastating for them. Um, but I don't see them. I don't see this game being close. To be honest, I'll say Green Bay's probably wins 28-7,
I
and I
think
think
that
that
I think the Falcons will put up some points. I think it'll be a Green Bay victory for sure, but I'm going to go 35-21. I think that they will score, but I think that Aaron Rodgers will score more, and um I just think that this Falcons team has to figure out their identity defensively. Um but until they show anything like that, yeah, no, it's definitely the Packers all
well,
the way. In the early game, however, this is a very intriguing matchup, or it was an intriguing matchup until the latest virus updates hit. but we have the Chiefs at the Patriots. Obviously, this game is going to be a little bit tainted with the fact that it'll be Stidham in the backfield with Sony Michel and Rex Burkhead instead of Cam Newton. So that kind of takes away a little bit of the dynamic of the new Patriots offense that I'll call it. Um, I already was thinking the Chiefs are going to win this game. Obviously they're the hottest team, and until they lose a game, I'm picking the Chiefs. I think they win this one, and I think they put up some points on this Patriots D. I'm gonna go 35-14.
Okay. It's so weird for me to see this New England Patriots have a 32nd ranked passing offense, which is something we have never seen out of a New England Patriots team in a long time. But on the opposite side, when was the last time they've had a top 5 rushing team in NFL ranks? So I think this team has completely switched its identity to more of a run heavy offense instead of using an arm like Tom Brady has had in the very very past for this team. I do think, however, these both of these teams have a very heavy defense, and this will become a defensive game. I'm gonna say 21-14 Kansas City.
That's a very good possibility. But so kind of tying this all together, we're gonna go ahead and take our viewer question of the episode. And this question came from someone near and dear to my heart. My father, Carlos. He said a very intriguing question. He asked this obviously before this weekend games, but we're just getting to it now. But he said, "Who's the most overrated player on a current NFL roster?" And it kind of got me thinking. I kind of went through some of the top teams. Kind of seeing who's overrated per se. On a team that competes, but I think that my overrated player actually lies on a team that is kind of underperforming for what people thought, and I'm gonna go with Miles Sanders. A lot of people, I mean, there's people who had him as a top 5 running back this season with him getting all the carries in Philly. Like basically it was scripted for him to be a top rusher. But the inconsistency of his hands, the inability to be a factor in the passing game with those skeptical hands. I just think that he has not lived up to the hype of the season. Obviously, it's still early in the season. He has plenty of time to turn it around, but I just think that he's got to put up more than less than 50 yards a game, and 2 touchdowns is just not going to cut it.
All right. So had I actually not been sick yesterday, my answer to this question would have been Odell Beckham. However, he proceeded to prove me extremely wrong in this facet on Sunday during his game. So I'm gonna have to switch this up slightly. If I had, I'm gonna go to a quarterback position here. And I couldn't really decide which way I wanted to lean for this one. And I'm gonna get a lot of heat for me saying this out loud. I'm gonna go with Jimmy G. I think Jimmy G is extremely overrated quarterback in this league. He hasn't really done much since earning his big contract. And when they made it to the Super Bowl, it was mainly because their defense was so outstanding. And I just don't think his numbers are worth all that money he was given. He had one good season, and other than that, he's basically been hurt or underperforming.
And I figured you were going to go the quarterback route. I honestly thought that you were going to go to a different team with this pick, but I agree with you to an extent. I think what I was shown last night in that fourth quarter with what CJ Beathard did. I understand that the Eagles defense was kind of in prevent mode. They didn't want to give up the big play, so was able to drive it down there and score. But I do think that there's a lot of quarterbacks who, with that defense last year, would have been in the same position. I don't think that Jimmy G was the reason that they were in that position, like you had stated prior. Um, However, I do think that the team is better with Jimmy G than the other two options. But with that being said, Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard are not
The answer either.
the elite quarterbacks by any means.
I really wanted to say Baker, but I don't.
That is who I thought you were going to say. But
It's only been 3 years. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to go with somebody who has barely been in the league for less than 5 years. And I mean, yeah, when Jimmy G played back up to Brady, we didn't see him much. But I mean, 2018, he's been with San Francisco for 4 years now,
and
and he's
injuries
already
have
hurt this year.
injuries have plagued those statistics. But I would like to, with you saying you couldn't say Baker, I would just like to bring this up, and this is just something that I've kind of I heard the other day. Adam Schefter said this, but did you notice like a trend? Is all of the quarterbacks that are like the really good young quarterbacks right now, like the Patrick Mahomes, you have like Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson, all of them took extreme strides between their second and third years. And I think that that's something that there's some quarterbacks just didn't do. But I also think that has to do with the situation that these quarterbacks were put in. So listen, you also have to look at this. Patrick Mahomes when the Chiefs drafted him, they didn't need Patrick Mahomes. They had Alex Smith.
Correct.
You have the Bills. They drafted Josh Allen. Did they need him? No, they had Tyrod Taylor, who literally led him to the playoffs.
And now look at Tyrod Taylor.
And no, what I'm saying is what I'm saying is Baker drafted, instantly thrown into the pit fire of, he didn't have a veteran quarterback who could
so
win.
Essentially what you're saying what I'm groomed.
Yes, and that is what that is what I was getting to about what Adam Schefter said. Is all of these quarterbacks, they when they were drafted, they weren't necessarily needed. These good quarterbacks. I mean, Deshaun didn't start right away. He had what is it? Savage and the man for New England,
Hoyer,
yeah. They were both in Houston, I believe. It's just all these good quarterbacks had a time to just watch the season, run the scout teams. And that's honestly, I would say that's kind of what happened to like the Sam Darnold's, Josh Rosen's. They got thrown into the spotlight and they just weren't ready. Like,
and I 100% agree with you, because if we look at, I'm just going to throw these quarterbacks out here real quick. Aaron Rodgers didn't play right away. He sat behind Brett Favre. Tom Brady didn't play right away.
Sat behind Bledsoe.
And he was only in because of an injury.
Mm-hmm.
You can say the same for numerous good quarterbacks. I mean, Kirk Cousins actually.
But he was behind. He was in was it Washington, and he
was in Washington behind. Oh my God, I can't think of it.
Was that back when they had McNabb? No, it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago.
But I mean, even these great quarterbacks this season weren't rushed to play, and I think that.
Oh, he was RG3. RG3 got hurt. Remember?
Was that RG? Oh, that was.
Yeah,
that was the season after he had his breakout.
Yeah, because they drafted both of them.
Yeah, that was
in the same year. Yep, that's what it was.
Unfortunate set of circumstances.
But for real, like they legitimately and it's weird how it worked out like that. But most quarterbacks, that the ones that succeed early in their career and don't take a few years to get going, like obviously you have some that make it work. But they just have time. They get groomed.
And I agree. And I think that, which is why I think getting drafted to a team who desperately needs a quarterback is never great when you're a rookie, because I think the expectation is a little too high for you
Mhm.
having to come out and immediately start performing. You don't have that leeway of, okay, we can throw you, if our season is going badly, we can throw you in a couple games and let you see how you do, and then when the next season rolls around, we can then say, okay, this is now your team. As to where if you're playing for the Browns, it's basically, oh, we're going to draft you. We're going to give you 2 games to perform. If you perform, you can have the team. If you don't, we're moving on. And I just don't think that's good for anybody's confidence.
Exactly. And reeling it back into this, like to this group of people, I do think, like, don't get me wrong, it is very possible to be the guy, come in, immediately start helping your team. Like it's happened before. But I think that when you look across the board and you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Dwayne Haskins, I think that if they would be drafted into a different situation, I think that it's a completely different ball game. That's why I think, and people call me crazy whenever like I got asked about it before, is the Jordan Love pick by the Green Bay Packers that everybody hated on. I honestly
Yeah.
think it was smart, because the thing is you don't want to draft a quarterback when you need a quarterback, because they don't pan out. And it's just historically they don't pan out. Because if you think about it, Lamar Jackson sat behind Joe Flacco, and
That's very
he's
true.
the reigning MVP. I mean, literally, there's so many. Teddy Bridgewater sat behind. Um, well, he sat behind Breeze last year. Obviously, he kind of got thrown into the fire with the Vikings early in his career, but he's rebounded. Jared Goff. Did Jared Goff get thrown into the?
Um,
I don't remember. I was
Not
I was
necessarily.
a,
But
I was a
didn't Teddy
Rams.
Bridgewater sit behind Brett Favre in Minnesota?
Did
Wasn't that?
I don't think he was in the league that long. I'm about to look that up.
I was gonna
But
say,
anyway,
because if that's the case, even Teddy Bridgewater was. I mean, it was Brett Favre's end of the season, but it was just. I agree with you on that.
and that's kind of why I thought you were going to go the Baker Mayfield route, but I was going to go ahead and say that statistic that obviously I got to watch Baker play a lot. I watched him play Texas. I watched him do some very vulgar stuff on the field to Texas teams. But at the end of the day, I think you give them, like you said, don't judge them within the 5 years. Um, but I think that there's a lot of quarterbacks that, if you look across the board, I just don't think that the answers for these struggling teams. And I think that's why everybody's, the joke is tank for Trevor. But I think the best thing for like the Trevor, the Trey Lances, the Justin Fields is to get drafted to a team who has, even if it's an end of the road starter. Say somebody gets drafted to Tampa next year. Say like he falls to the later rounds, or the later first round. Gets to sit behind Brady for even one season for the rest of Brady's contract, and then gets thrown in the fire. He's already that much better than your alternative.
Right. I hear what you're saying, and it's just, I don't know. We have come such a long way in the grooming process and what to expect out of certain
Oh, and
players.
to answer the question from earlier, Bridgewater sat behind Matt Castle,
Okay.
so
Okay.
he was thrown in after Castle struggled.
I was super confused with all that, but
Yes.
since we're on football, I do want to throw out one little statistic that we are. Um, so the number one passer with the most amount of yards through four games is Dak Prescott with 1690 yards. The second person is Mr. Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills at 1,326. So you tell me why Dallas sucks so badly.
Well, we already hit on it.
Yeah.
Their defense has always cost them. They're only getting older. Um, their younger cornerbacks haven't lived up to the hype that they had brought preseason. And I mean, like there was a couple plays that they just got beat by the Browns receivers, just wanting it more. So I think that it falls on the defense.
It
I
is
don't.
infuriating.
You definitely can't blame it on the offense. I mean, the offense got a slow start. You can blame it on that. I mean, two scoreless quarters is never. You're never going to win a game if you go two quarters scoreless. So it was a team loss for sure. But
Right.
it's still. I think it falls mainly on the defense.
That's fair.
But anyway, it should be a fun time for the for sports today. With two football games, you normally get this, so enjoy it. And
The LDS starts today too. Don't forget.
ALDS, some interesting matchups that most people didn't necessarily see happening. So um, I think we just leave it on that note. Everybody have a safe week, and we will catch you on Wednesday.
All right, y'all. Take it easy. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video and the channel, and we'll talk to you more on Wednesday.
Yep. Peace.
So, yep.